What does it take to speak the truth when fear, ridicule, and even your career are on the line? Jennifer Sey has lived that answer. From exposing abuse in elite gymnastics, to defying corporate silence, to standing up for children during the pandemic. Her story is about courage in the face of consequence, and it's one that you're not going to want to miss. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. Today's guest is someone whose life story reads like a masterclass in courage. Jennifer Sey is a 7-time U.S. national team gymnast and the 1986 all-around national champion who became one of the first athletes to speak out against the culture of abuse in her sport. Her memoir, Chalked Up, and the Emmy-winning Netflix documentary Athlete A gave voice to countless gymnasts who had been silenced for decades. But Jen's courage did not stop there. After rising to the top of Levi Strauss & Company as brand president, she made national headlines by standing against school closures during COVID, sacrificing a 23-year career rather than her principles. She tells that story in her book, Levi's Unbuttoned. Today, she's the founder and CEO of XXXY Athletics, the only athletic brand openly defending fairness in women's sports, and she's producing the upcoming documentary, Generation COVID. Jennifer Sey's journey is one of candor, resilience, and relentless commitment to the truth, no matter the cost. Let's get into it with my friend Jennifer Sey. Here we go. Jennifer Sey, thank you for joining me on the Derate the Hate podcast. I am so grateful to see you today.
So happy to be here.
It's wonderful. I've been following your work for a little while, Jen, and the story or stories that you have and have to tell are so powerful. One of the things people know about me, the work that I do at Braver Angels, but one of the core tenets at Braver Angels is encouraging people to speak up freely, fully, without fear. That's not always possible in our everyday lives. And a lot of people in the past several years have experienced some ugliness as a result of trying to speak up freely, fully, and without fear. And I never want to tell people to get themselves in trouble at work because
Right.
That's how they support themselves. But somebody who for decades now has spoken freely, fully, without fear, and dealt with some ugly consequences for that. But I want to start our conversation today, Jen, with your days as a gymnast and some of the things then that needed to be said but weren't being said.
Yeah. I want to add one thing to what you just said, which is I don't know that anyone ever does it without fear. The question is, how do you kind of go forward with fear? And that's really, to my mind, what courage is. Like, you don't have to eliminate the fear. That's human. But how do you kind of push forward and overcome it? Because I'm always terrified. Just like, I was a gymnast as a young person in the 1980s, a very successful gymnast. I was like an 8-time national team member, and I was the national champion in 1986. Some argue the worst national champion ever. And I won't really push back on that. But that was still what I was. It was a really abusive training environment, emotionally, physically, and as everybody knows at this point, there was rampant sexual abuse as well. That was exposed with Larry Nassar, who was the trainer and doctor for Team USA. He started around the year that I finished, so I evaded him. But it was the culture. I think it's still the culture, I'll be frank. It's hard to undo these things. It's hard to change a culture that's been entrenched for 50 years. But I do think because of how it's been exposed, it's changing. It's slow. And so I grew up in an environment where young athletes were to be seen and not heard. Obedience was literally almost beaten into us, certainly drilled into us. The kids that spoke up in their own defense, the kids that said, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, you didn't last on the team long. If you made the national team, you would not find yourself in the rotation. I mean, we were taught from a very young age to just keep our mouths shut. So I don't come by this naturally. I'll just say that. I had to fight for my own voice in many ways. But 20 years after I left the sport, I was, despite being a successful person, I was a grown up. I had 2 kids at the time. I have 4 now, but I had 2 at the time. I was a vice president already in the corporate world. I had a successful career, but I really suffered and struggled with low self-esteem and anxiety and depression. And I felt bad about myself all the time, but I guess not debilitating ways, but in ways that were definitely not allowing me to kind of optimize my happiness.
Okay.
I'm not a big ruminator, and I wasn't in tons of therapy, and I wasn't medicated, but I wanted to feel better. It didn't make I was very rational about it, right? Like, my life, it didn't make sense that I felt this way when I had a successful career, 2 kids, like, everything should have been good. But I was so unbelievably hard on myself, and I always felt like a failure. And so I wrote the book. I sort of sat down to think about these things, and I sat down in a room by myself and wrote my first book called Chalked Up, which came out in 2008. And it is really very much about the abuse in the sport. I did it as like my own exercise to understand what happened. And it allowed me to understand that this culture that I grew up in, it was not tough coaching, it was abuse. And
Right.
That's why I felt the way that I did. And it was like, for me, understanding it allowed me to get past it.
Okay.
But I put myself in this situation. Like, I didn't go out there screaming about it. I wrote a book by myself in my room. I didn't think all that much about what the reception would be. I did sort of tell myself in my mind, be as honest as you can about yourself when that reflects poorly on you, when there's ugly parts about yourself and the ugliest things that you maybe feel ashamed of. These are the things, if this book ever sees the light of day, that will help other people. So You should be as honest as you can. So that's what I did.
That is amazing. And I mean, it takes incredible courage. And that's one of the things that I want to ask about, because knowing what you knew about the sport and knowing what you knew about that culture, and knowing that there were so many people that experienced what you experienced, but never did speak up, or whether it be for lack of courage, or that they just didn't want to be labeled as that person, or whatever it was. But what do you think it was inside you, Jennifer, that said, hey, I've actually, I mean, you talked about the not being happy part, but what was it that gave you that spark of courage that said, no, this story has to be told?
I think a lot of people don't speak up in the sport because they almost suffer from what I would describe as Stockholm syndrome. They don't see it. They're still sort of held captive to it. They still want to please the coaches and the culture. They don't even see it, which I find just terribly sad. And one of the things I'm most proud of is, because of this book and because of a film I made later, Athlete A, it allowed many gymnasts to see that what they experienced was abuse. Because we're told it's tough coaching and you're weak if you suffer. And then we believe that and carry that into our adulthood. I guess I knew somewhere in my heart of hearts that I wasn't weak, that I was strong, and that I didn't deserve to feel this way, and that I should not be going through my day with this amount of anxiety and sadness and self-loathing. There was no reason for it. I knew in my heart that I was smart and a good person, and I treated others with kindness, and I shouldn't think everything's my fault all the time.
Right.
I shouldn't always feel like I'm failing as a mom and a wife and an executive, and it just didn't make sense. Like, it just defied any sort of basic common sense. And I just sort of knew that somewhere in myself.
Yeah.
And I knew if I could dive into it, I could make more sense. And I really started to understand that the tactics deployed by my coaches, by USA Gymnastics, they're cult-like and they're abusive.
Yeah.
If you tell a 13-year-old child who weighs 80 pounds, that you have to lose 3 pounds by tomorrow by any means necessary, I don't care how you do it, I don't coach fat gymnasts, and you say that on the loudspeaker in a gym so everybody can hear it, that's not tough coaching. That is child abuse. Mm-hmm. If you force a child to train on broken bones, that's child abuse. If you have the doctor come in and shoot a minor child up with corticosteroids every few weeks so they can keep training on those broken bones, that's child abuse. And so, I don't know. I guess they say when addicts, you have to hit bottom to kind of want it bad enough to climb out. I think I didn't have like an ugly bottom, but I just didn't want to feel that way anymore. And I was willing to do the work, to use their language, to feel better. And I wanted to do it myself. I didn't want to be guided by a therapist. I didn't want medication. I knew that there was a thing. I knew that it was wrong, and that I had been told that there was nothing wrong with this coaching and it was me, and I had to sort it. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. People ask that all the time, but I will tell you this, Will, that once you start down this path of speaking out, it does get easier over time. When the book first came out, it was right before the Olympics in 2008. And the pushback was intense from my own teammates, from Team USA, from USA Gymnastics and the USOPC. And at first I kind of retracted. I kind of like pulled back a little bit. And I'd say, oh, it's not the sport. This is not an indictment of the sport. This is just my experience. And then I was like, no, it is the sport. I'm not going. I got braver and I became more assertive and more outspoken. And I think it really set me up to be as outspoken as I was during COVID. And the thing that guides me is really just standing up for children, because I guess I look back on my childhood and I think, gosh, there was so much good that came from gymnastics and it could have all been good. And yet no adult who should have known better, no parent, no sane coach in the gym, no one spoke out in our defense. Yeah. And so I want to be that adult.
Yeah. And people should be immensely grateful, Jen, that people like you were standing up for children then and standing up for children now and then standing up for women now. So like you said, you found a place, you found a voice. It does become easier as people start standing up for what they know is right. And while it is incredibly difficult, it takes incredible courage, and it will continue to take courage. Like you said at the beginning of this conversation, it's not that there's not fear. You're terrified at times to stand up and say what you say. But what I've found in my work, Jen, is that real growth doesn't come inside our comfort zone. We cannot just pretend that if we don't step out once in a while, and some of us will step out further than others, and that's fine. But our real growth is not going to come inside our comfort zone we have to have the courage to stand up and speak out. And so let's transition a little bit, because your time as a gymnast and then speaking out with the book Chalked Up, and then Athlete A, it's become a movie. In 2020, we reached the point of the pandemic, and you are a successful business executive with Levi's at that time, and you start. It probably that instinct kicked in again, right? Somebody needs to speak up for the children, and some of us, I think a lot more than has ever been known, we're speaking up and saying, "Hey, there's a problem here.
Right.
We need to think about this. We need to look at this a little bit deeper. We need to get the conversation going. It needs to happen." But back to that thing that I was saying earlier, is self-censorship was it more than any time in my lifetime. That self-censorship thing started kicking in, and for good reason, because people were losing their jobs, losing their career because of it. So talk to me then, Jen, about where you were in your career at Levi's, and then what made you say, I've got to start speaking up again.
Yeah, I think one important point I would just mention is by about 2018, I was completely redeemed in the gymnastics and sport community. And then Athlete A came out in 2020. And I mean, it was like I had gone from being persona non grata, this like horrible, weak, ridiculous person who was smearing coaches and gymnasts back in 2008 to a hero who saw it and spoke out. So maybe I was riding a little high. I don't know. Maybe I had a little bit of overconfidence. I'm joking, of course, but I did sort of come to see that if you say the thing and you say the truth thing, the truth does out in the end. It might take a decade. It might take a really long time. But after 10 years, 12 years of speaking out about this abuse, it came out that I had told the truth all along. So I believe truth outs in the end. And I think that I have some sort of like allergic, like I cannot say a lie. I just won't do it. And it just seemed so clear to me at the start of COVID. And keep in mind, I lived in San Francisco. So it was about as bad as it could be in San Francisco, the lockdown. Schools were closed there for close to 19 months. Kids had disrupted schooling for another year and a half after that. We waited, look, every day we were like on pins and needles, like, can we go to dark orange so we're allowed to go to the park? Like, it was this insane system. And I just, from the very beginning, my husband and I have to say that was incredibly helpful. I know couples that were not in agreement on this, but he and I were in lockstep from day one. So I always had him I could turn to say, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not crazy, right? And all the facts for anyone who followed along, they all say we didn't know in the beginning. We did know. All the data was there from the very beginning. Anyone who spoke out and cited that data from the beginning about children being essentially at no risk, about how something as extreme as lockdowns was never going to work. It just couldn't. It sort of denies our basic humanity. And that all that data was available from the beginning, but anybody who sort of put it out there from the beginning got smeared and retreated. Many people, there were early articles in the New York Times by scientists whose names we don't hear now because they just decided it wasn't worth it. And then you have people like Dr. Bhattacharya who continued to speak out, journalists like David Zweig. So I don't know. It sort of started like I didn't have a following on social media, but I just was like in my nice lady corporate voice. Are we sure this makes sense? I'm not a very combative person. I would cite data. I would post articles in respectable publications. I thought that's not going to get me in trouble. But very quickly, I realized this was more contentious than I realized. And I built a platform sort of slowly over time because they're just moms basically across the country who were speaking out about kids. And I really focused on children. I thought that was a bridge that no one wants to harm children. So it was sort of like, I thought, a gateway drug to question COVID restrictions. I was wrong. There was no questioning that was permissible at all in the first 3 years. And I would say even now it's questionable whether it's permitted, we can get to that. But I just kept going. And the minute people started to come after me, my friends, my family, my neighbors, people chased me down the street screaming at me that they wouldn't care if my children died and I will deserve it when my children die. It was like the world went insane. And I felt like if I can be this calm voice and speak the truth, the children need it, our civil liberties need it. Somebody has to do it. The more I was told that I couldn't, the more I got mad. I do get mad at a certain point. And
Sure.
For me, a real kind of tipping point was in the fall of 2020, all of the private schools opened in San Francisco. And my kids went to public school. I might be the only executive that lived in San Francisco that had children in public school. And all the people screaming and singing out their window about staying home to stay safe and calling me a Nazi and a bigot and a murderer were sending their kids to in-person private school. So it was the most elitist, disgusting thing. 60% of the children in San Francisco public schools are low income or below the poverty line. We were harming the most vulnerable. And I just can't, I don't know. I made a choice at a certain point that I was either going to keep standing up for children and possibly alter the course of my life forever, which is what happened, or I was going to be a pathetic coward. And I decided not to be a coward.
Yeah, well, and it's such a tough thing to do, again, because what you're about to do is going to have an immense effect on the future of you, the future of your family, your children, all of those things. To stand up with that courage is, in my opinion, it's a hugely important thing for society. I mean, again, I keep on using the word courage because, again, the organization that I work with is about courageous connections. It's about standing up and speaking freely and fully, and not everybody can do that. And I don't even want and I'm not knocking anybody who didn't, but those of us who did, I think it needs, and this is not looking for pats on the back, but the reality is for society to change, for society to course correct when things have gone sideways or when things are clearly out of bounds from what makes sense, there has to be people that stand up with courage and speak. Our friends Jay Bhattacharya, David Zweig, Johnny Anides, these different people who spoke up when it wasn't popular to speak up. It takes immense courage to do that. And I'm just glad that there were enough people that have. And like you said, Jen, it may not, the tides may not turn in a day, a month, a year, but hopefully at some point after a decade. And I think we're starting to turn the page on the COVID story. And thankfully I've been able to have some of these conversations with people, some of the world's greatest minds on these things, especially the non-pharmaceutical interventions that were used during COVID, the school lockdowns, the school masking, things like that. Talk to me then about, okay, so your children were in public school in San Francisco, and let's get into that just a little bit more. 19 months, they're held out of school, but I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact, again, that you mentioned a statistic there that people lose sight of, that a lot of these kids, and and the reason I bring this up, Jen, is because of your movie Generation COVID. Generation COVID is a movie that'll be coming out soon, right? About this young generation of school kids that missed so much or were so greatly affected, not good affected, but right,
impacted significantly,
hugely affected. Let's just say by the school closures and things like that. So talk to me
Yeah.
then about the disparate impact that had,
Yeah.
especially on those that couldn't afford to send their kids
Right.
to public or private school.
Private. Yeah. I ended up leaving in the spring, in about February of 21, so my kids could go to school. So we didn't go the full 19 months, but I had kids. I have, my age spread of my children is wide. I have four. So I had one in college, a public university in California. He was at Berkeley. I had one in high school, and I had one starting kindergarten, and then I had one in preschool. A lot of spread. So I
Wow.
was seeing the impact at all ages. Now, I fully acknowledge anyone who isn't like clear on this, they're not like, I was an executive for many years at Levi's. I could afford to speak out. I realize I'm very blessed. Certainly it's made my life much harder since I did and put me on a different path. But I also felt like if I can, I have to, because some people can't. I have great empathy. Some people cannot speak out because they cannot go a day without their salary. And I am lucky enough that I am able to do that. But like I said, over the course of my outspokenness, I did not anticipate that being the end, my being ousted from corporate America entirely and having to forge. If I'd known from the beginning, I probably would have still done it. But I didn't. I start down this path, and then I get the pushback, and then I get angry. And I say, you can't, and in my mind, I go, well, you can't tell me what I can and cannot say. And I'm speaking the truth, and I'm doing it with kindness. I'm not a name caller. I'm doing this with facts and kindness, and I will not stop. But I had children in San Francisco Unified for many years. I knew that student population. I don't think it takes a genius to understand that the student population is more vulnerable than the student population in the $60,000 a year private schools. It takes one Google search to know that 60% are living at or below the poverty line. It's not hard. It's not hard to understand that for people that are hourly wage essential workers, they're leaving children home alone, perhaps very young children with no oversight or guidance. I mean, the hypocrisy was like rampant. It just drove me crazy. They had these study centers that they set up in San Francisco for homeless children, poor children whose parents may have been out working. So they put an hourly wage worker in there. That was fine for that person to be in there. But teachers couldn't be in a classroom. I mean, it's just like none of it made any freaking sense at all.
Boggles the mind.
It boggles the mind. It didn't take a genius. I'm not that smart to understand that if you isolate teenage children right when they're supposed to be out in the world individuating from their parents, like right at that critical moment, that they were going to suffer and that they were going to have developmental issues, depression, anxiety, all of these things. It's exactly what happened. Like I said, I'm not that smart. I just thought about people as human beings, not as cogs in some model, if you just thought about it a little bit. So the most vulnerable children were certainly harmed the most. It was all upside down. All of this was said to protect the vulnerable, but we harmed the vulnerable the most. And the laptop classes, Dr. J calls them, were the ones that could skate through and sit in judgment of everyone else who was pushing back. I cannot fathom a more egregious violation of our civil liberties than what we went through during that time. Through decree, not legislation, we were told we could not leave our homes. We could not visit loved ones in the hospital. We couldn't send our children to school, run our businesses, go to AA meetings if we need them, go to church if that's what we do. I will never for the life of me understand how the whole country didn't say no. But fear, it's the fear mongering, the constant drumbeat of fear, the death ticker on CNN that drove people insane. But my reason I will not stop talking about this until there is some sort of reckoning is it will happen again, and people will fall prey to the same fear again. And Gavin Newsom will do his same decrees all over again if it gets him more power. And we will harm the youngest and the most vulnerable again, because that's always who gets harmed the most. So
Yeah.
I mean, that was a long answer, but I guess I just knew, and I couldn't stop thinking about the kids. I couldn't stop thinking about them.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I unfortunately just like I said, for whatever reason, and I don't want to ascribe motives to anybody, but for whatever reason, there just weren't enough people speaking up. I want to step back real quick, Jen, to something that you had said, and it's something I meant to ask earlier in the conversation, but the book Levi's Unbuttoned, they took my job, but gave me my voice. Talk to me about that and what that was like at Levi's, because you'd been there for a couple decades, right? And what the personal impact. I mean, I know what the mission was. I know what your heart was telling you to do as far as the kids. But talk to me a little bit about what that felt like for you after having been there so long, and then ostensibly being pushed out of that spot.
Yeah, I worked there 23 years. It's a brand I wore since I was 6 years old. I still wear it all the time. When I got to work there, I think I was 29 when I started. It was such an honor. I took a step back to start there because I just loved the brand so much. I worked my way up from entry-level marketing assistant. I was then the chief marketing officer for 8 years and the brand president. I mean, there was a lot of stuff in between. I loved the place, and I felt like I made a real difference there. And I don't think anybody would argue with that I worked with at the time over many, many years. Mm-hmm. I think the hardest thing, this was my community. You work in a place for 23 years. Those are your friends, some like family. I had been to funerals and weddings and baby showers. And certainly I had a community beyond Levi's in San Francisco more broadly, and my college friends. And so I'll sort of extrapolate beyond Levi's, but that was like where my life was centered at the time. There was not a single person that said, Jen's okay. Jen is not a rabble rouser. Maybe we should listen, or maybe we should support her right to say this thing. Or it was just across the board. I mean, of all of my friends that I had a lot of friends from college, hundreds, one is left, one that still talks to me. So that's the thing. And it's from my friends and colleagues at Levi's, but also in San Francisco, and then my sort of college cohort. It's like these people that know what's in your heart. They know your intellect. They know that you don't just like say dumb stuff, but go down weird rabbit holes. You're not a conspiracy theorist. You're a thoughtful person. You take it very seriously. If you're going to have an opinion and you're going to express it, you are good-hearted and you try to do what's best by people. They know all of these things about you. And yet will either stand in silence as you're smeared and vilified, or pile on, in many cases, pile on that she is a racist and a eugenicist and all of these things. Like, can they possibly believe this about a person that they've known and worked side by side with, or known for 30 years and raised children with? Like, I don't understand the mindset. I will always stand up for a person's right to say a thing, even if I vehemently disagree with it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it was heartbreaking. But like I said, I had my husband, who is my best friend, and I knew couples who disagreed on these things, and I can't imagine how difficult that would have been. But I had him. I mean, I basically just had him for a while because my own family wasn't great. We figured it out my parents and I had figured it out. My brother and I don't speak still 5.5 years later. You started out by saying this, like, I warn people, you could lose a lot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I believe it's worth it. I've done it anyway. It doesn't mean that there aren't still moments where I feel quite heartbroken over all of it. It doesn't mean I don't still hope that these things can be repaired. But I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm going to move on with my life and keep speaking out in defense of children. I just, at this point, don't know what else to do. I have a new group of friends. We stand together. And I've got my husband, and I can look myself in the mirror and know that I was kind and spoke the truth.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, Jen, because One of the things that I always think back on is that phrase that just because everybody's doing a thing doesn't make it right, and just because nobody's doing a thing doesn't make it wrong. We have to be true to ourselves. We have to follow the guidance of whatever higher power that we believe in, and do what we believe is right, even when that takes immense courage to do it. Again,
I think the hard thing, though, sorry, not to interrupt you. One of the things I find I have to work really hard at is to not be angry now, because I don't want to be angry. I want to be, as my friend Tiffany Justice says, a joyful warrior, and I want to be grateful for the things that I have. And I think if I'm really angry, I won't be effective in the way that I communicate, and I certainly won't be happy. I'll be eaten alive by the anger. And Dr. J is quite good at this, staying in the light and the positive. He's one of the kindest people I know, but I have moments where I'm very angry. My life has changed forever. I thought I loved San Francisco. I thought I would live there forever, retire there. I loved my place that I lived. I had created it over many, many years. It was perfect for my family. I thought I would retire at Levi's. I certainly didn't think I would be starting my own business at 55 and like doing that slog and living in a city that I have no idea where I'm going ever. But I try to just embrace it and be grateful for this life and not fall prey to too much anger, which can be hard. I mean, I think you have to try to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the things that I talk about so often, Jen, is how gratitude is the genesis of happiness, and if we want to be effective messengers, then we have to really lean into that. We have to lean into gratitude. We have to be grateful for what we've got and be able to work through those things that are outside of our control, those things that can just affect our ability to do many things in such an ugly way. That gratitude, in which I'm glad you brought it up, because not enough people understand that the gratitude factor and how we're grateful for, in your case, your husband being your rock, the one person that stood beside you when all of this stuff was going wrong, and now you have new friends, and you've got this beautiful new business that you've started. And I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that just because one thing ends doesn't mean another thing might not be right around the corner. And we can do great things. And again, courage, having the courage to step outside of our comfort zone. And that's where real growth happens. And I think the world is immensely, or should be immensely grateful for your words and for what you're doing for children and now for women with your XXXY clothing line. I mean, there is so much going on here, Jen. So many more things that we could talk about. I would love to continue the conversation, but we'll save that for another time. You're incredible. The movie is Generation COVID. Why don't you tell the DTH listeners where they can find out more about you, more about the movie, and we'll wrap this one up and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, I started filming with my partner, my directing partner, Andrew James, in 2022. So we were filming when kids were still really, really in it. So there's a rawness to it that I think is effective. You can go to generationcovidfilm.com to learn more about the film. It's not out yet, but it will be soon, next few months. Best way to stay up on the film and just me and the brand XXXY Athletics is me on X, which is just me, Jennifer Sey, S-E-Y. And check out our brand. I started a brand, as you alluded to, called XXXY Athletics, only a year old, and we're the only athletic brand standing up for fair competition and women's sports, the protection of women's sports. So
it's a beautiful thing. Speaking up with courage, thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate your time today and definitely look forward to more conversations in the future. Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate The Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here and we will catch you next week. Take care.